Claritas Accountancy. We're based in Hungerford and Wokingham. And a lot of just before I start this presentation, I will point out that keep an eye on the Gov website, because things do change. There's new advice coming out all the time, so there's a very useful website address for you. Keep an eye on that. So as business owners, sole traders are getting the self-employment income support scheme grant again from the 1st of November to January. There's going to be the first payment. It hasn't been announced what it's going to be, but there's going to be another one from the 1st of February to April. And at the moment, it's the same as it was last time, with the 80% of your average monthly profits. This isn't actually available to claim yet. You should be able to claim the first grant from the end of this month. And also as well, this self-employment scheme, it does actually apply to partnerships as well. So if you're in a partnership, this is also available to you. But keep an eye on the Gov website, because they are going to be announcing how this can be claimed if you're a self-employed person. Limited companies, unfortunately, are in a little bit of a hole between self-employed people and employed people, whereas there aren't any income grants available, but there are two loans. The bounce back loan, I'm sure you've probably all heard of this. You can borrow 25% of your turnover from £2,000 to £50,000. So obviously to claim the full 50,000, you have to be turning over £200,000 a year. There's no interest or repayments for the first 12 months of taking out the loan, and after that it's fixed at 2.5%, which I'm sure as you can recognise, it's a very, very favourable interest rate. The interesting thing that has changed though, because this was supposed to be abolished on the 5th of November, I think, they've now extended it to the end of January. But there's a top-up now available. So if you've already taken out, just say for example, you were turning over £100,000 and you thought, well, actually, I'll just take out £10,000, that should see me through. But now you realise it's not going to. You can apply for an additional amount to take it up to the full 25 grand. So that's an interesting update on that. And then the coronavirus business interruption scheme, they're much bigger loans normally, but as long as you can self-certify that your business has been affected, you can apply for that. There's a bit more to do around the what they call the C bills, the coronavirus business interruption loan. Normally you have to produce accounts, maybe even a cash flow projection, bits and pieces like that. Whereas a bounce back loan, I think it's just 3 questions. How much do you want to borrow? Have you been affected by coronavirus? How long do you want to pay it back? Because you can pay it back over a shorter period than the 5 years if you want to. And then the only other thing with the business interruption loan scheme is your business must have been viable before, I think it was March when it first came out. You must have had a viable business up until that point. So if you're already trading with a retained losses and the business was already on a downward spiral, then you wouldn't be able to apply for that. I didn't actually realise that Karen was going to touch on this, but I did have chucked in a bit about the furlough scheme, because the furlough scheme's now changed. It's back, but it's different from before. They're still paying now up to 80%, but they're not covering the employer's national insurance anymore, and they're not covering the pension contributions, which is they used to under the old furlough scheme. And you can only claim back the hours that your employees haven't worked. So just say, for example, they're on a 30-hour contract, but they've worked 15 hours. You can only claim for the 15 hours that they haven't worked. The other bit you have to pay. That's the website address again. A couple of other things actually I will touch on just before I sign off or take questions. If you've got a company and your corporation tax is now due, they are very, very generous with their time to pay arrangements at the moment. So if you phone them up and ask for a bit of leeway, then you get a time to pay arrangement put into place. They're basically agreeing to virtually anything that people ask for. And if you've got that time to pay arrangement in place, the interest payments are halted. So they won't charge you any interest on the number of months that you pay that loan off. Because a lot of people at the moment, they're finding that obviously their tax liabilities are hitting for the year that ended, say March or February, which was probably, it could have been quite a good year up until that point. So people are now struggling with cash flow on that. So there are time to pay arrangements available. And yeah, just one other thing on the loans. If you are taking out a bounce back loan, there is obviously a temptation there to take that and to use it as your income. There is potentially a pitfall with that, in as much as if you don't have the company's profits to cover the amount of money you've taken out, you could be subject to a thing called Section 455 tax, which is a corporation tax charged on the balance of the outstanding loan, and it's 32.5%, which is obviously quite punitive. So if you are taking out a bounce back loan, I would say, unless you absolutely have to, just keep that back to cover expenses for the business rather than your income, if you can, obviously. Oh, well, yeah, so and one other thing on the furlough thing, there is a slight pitfall for this, because if you can now claim furlough for employees that you had that started in October, which is great. And then obviously any employees that have started post-March, you can now claim for those. But if your RTI wasn't submitted by the end of October, and say it went on the 1st of November or the 2nd of November, and that person was on that RTI for the first time, you're not going to be able to claim furlough for them. So other than that, I think that's me. Are there any questions?
Steve, am I right in thinking that the interest rate on the CBILS loan is double what it is on the BBILS loan, just so that people know?
Yeah, the CBILS loan is more expensive. And I don't think there's even a fixed rate on it. I think it's a variable rate depending on the lender's attitude to risk. I think you'll find some people might actually get a lower rate than some other people. I don't think it's fixed on the CBILS.
And Steve, are there any restrictions on what you can use the bounce back loan from? I mean, I know you said that it's not very tax advantageous to use it as income, but are there any other restrictions?
Yeah, there's a couple. There's you're not allowed to spend it on anything that's a new purchase. So just say, for example, you're I don't know, let's pick on a tradesman and say you're a painter and decorator, and you've already got a van, but it's on its last legs, and you decide to use part of it to buy a new van. That's absolutely fine. But if you're using it to buy a new van and you've never had a van, that is technically not allowed. So it's got to be for renewed things rather than things that you've never had. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head.
Steve, do you have to prove that? Do you have to prove the expenditure of the bounce back loan?
No.
No. Okay.
No, it's basically at the moment, if you take it out, there's no challenge over what it's spent on. I mean, I'm not saying that wouldn't potentially happen in future, but at the moment, no. You just take the money and you spend it on what you want.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Steve? Oh, Andrew.
I seem to be asking a lot of questions today. A quick question. I've actually heard something, and it's been on the periphery, that they're actually extending the length of term potentially for the bounce back loans.
Oh yes, it's up to 10 years now. Yeah.
And if you've already got a bounce back loan, is it just a case of contacting the lender and just putting that into place?
Yeah, I'd assume so.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And I would say, just as a sort of caveat to anything that I've sort of talked about here, if you have got an accountant, definitely speak to your accountant, because obviously they've got specific information about your business, your personal circumstances, your tax liabilities, and everything else. So, just as a sort of caveat, I would say that what I've talked about today is kind of like generic advice. But if anyone wants to contact me about anything, I'm more than happy to have a chat. No charge, obviously. Contact details are on there, phone numbers. My email address is just steve@claritas.biz, B-I-Z. Feel free to drop me an email if you want to.
Just put your email address in the chat, Steve, in case anybody wants to take it.
Can do.
Thank you very much. Any more questions for Steve before we move on to Karen? No? Okay, Karen, over to you.
Okay. Okay, so I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. To move swiftly on, just quickly a little bit about me, because I haven't met most of you before. So I have my own HR consultancy, which is Professionals in Partnership, and I'm an associate to the Hungerford Legal and Financial Centre, so with Karen and Steve. And I've been running my business for about 4 years. So moving swiftly into the Kickstart scheme, this is the key detail about it. So as others have mentioned this evening, essentially the scheme has been set up for 16 to 24-year-olds because they are one of the hardest hit group from the coronavirus. And it's for those who are on universal credit. So the pool of candidates for this scheme are all on universal credit. So you can't have anybody else from anywhere else on a placement for the scheme. And it needs to be employers who are registered at Companies House or with the Charity Commission. So originally, if you were a sole trader, you could apply, but those terms and conditions changed a week last Friday, so that's no longer the case. And basically what you receive is, for a period of 6 months, is 25 hours a week at national minimum wage, which is at the rate that's appropriate for the age of the person that you take on. And employer national insurance contributions and any pension contributions that are required. In addition to that, you have access to a £1,500 setup grant. So in terms of making an application, if you have more than 30 placements that you think you might be able to provide through your company, you can do that directly. So you can just go onto the gov.uk website, and the link is there, and you can just put through your application yourself. If you've got less than 30 placements, you need to go through what's been called an intermediary and is currently called a gateway organisation. But essentially, it's an organisation who will pull together a number of different companies with maybe 2 or 3, maybe 5 placements, and they will put through the application on your behalf. I know there are a couple of you in the audience this evening that I've spoken to about this. So part of that application process is that you need to be able to support the individual to become more employable and to find long-term work. Now, actually, a lot of the people that I have spoken to have taken this as an opportunity to almost have like a paid probation period, and that people are actually quite keen to, if they manage to get a Kickstart placement, to be able to take them on and keep them longer term, which is really, really positive, I think. One of the other things you need to be able to demonstrate is that the job placements are not replacements for anybody. So for an example, if you've made redundancies in your company, you couldn't then apply for a Kickstart placement to get somebody to do the job that you've just made redundant, for an example. And also you can't reduce people's hours or those sorts of things. It's not about boosting up what you've got. It's got to be a new opportunity. So in terms of how I might be able to help, and obviously Gabrielle mentioned that the council are an intermediary, so they could help you, but also my company is working as a gateway organisation as well. So I've provided sort of a template application and job description for people to complete to make that easy. And also I'm working in partnership with another consultant, Nicola Lyle, who has an employability programme. So part of the skills piece that you need to be able to demonstrate can be outsourced effectively through this employability programme. And obviously you wouldn't necessarily need to be applying through me. You could still go through the council or whoever it is you might want to use. But that programme, if you were interested in it, if you let me know, I can send you through Nicola's details. So if you know anybody who might be interested in speaking to me more about it, just by all means pass on my details. So I don't know whether any of you have got any questions about the Kickstart scheme before I move into the furlough scheme.
Yes, Simon's got a question.
Karen, hi. What would happen in the event of an organisation that had perhaps furloughed people? Would they still be able to take on a Kickstarter?
That's a good question. I think probably not, because effectively you would, if you've got work to be done, you should be enabling your person who's on furlough to be able to come back to work to do that job.
Even if they're not qualified, Karen?
Well, oh, I see what you mean. If it's a completely new thing.
Yes.
Yeah, I think maybe, I mean, you'd have to be very, very clear about the difference between the two roles. I mean, for an example, if you had somebody, if you'd furloughed your accountant,
Yeah,
which would be a mad thing to do, but if you did, then, and you needed somebody, you know, you're going to bring in some Kickstart people in your distribution centre or something, then I think that would be fine. But I think you just have to be really clear about what it was they were doing and why that individual couldn't be brought back off furlough.
Yeah, because there could be professional people on furlough, you know, that are qualified, or, you know, and a 16 to 24-year-old, you know, might not be able to fill those positions. So they're completely different, aren't they?
Yeah, I suppose I was thinking about it in more general terms.
Yeah.
You know, that if you had an office manager or something,
yeah,
and you were going to bring somebody else in to help in customer service, for an example, you know, that might be deemed to be
inappropriate.
Could be transferable. You know, you could use that person into that role.
Yeah, like for like. Yeah. Thank you.
Does that help, Simon? Simon, is that okay? Is there any other questions? You're on mute, so I can't hear what you're saying. I can just sort of see your mouth moving.
Yeah, I was just simply want to ask. No, it's going through. Karen, I'll ring you tomorrow.
Okay. Okay. So, has anybody else got any other questions? No? Okay. So just moving into the furlough scheme, so the coronavirus job retention scheme. So I mean, obviously Steve has given you an overview of the kind of payroll side of things, but I just wanted to share with you kind of more of the administrative side of things, I suppose. So as Steve has said, that the scheme is running at 80% again. and it's likely to run until the end of March, but with a review in January. And you can backdate your furlough agreement to the 1st of November. Those who are shielding can be furloughed, but those who are in the same household as those shielding can also be furloughed, although the requirements around that have changed. And then again, this is something that Steve referred to. If anybody's left your employment, you can, I mean, the furlough scheme all the way through has enabled you to put people back on your payroll. But I think there are a number of other issues other than when the timing of their record on the RTI submission. But I think there's other things around employment service, accrued holiday leave, and those sorts of things that you would need to think about, and what the agreement is for those people actually coming back onto your payroll. And then in terms of the hours, again, as Steve said, it's about the hours that they've actually worked. And you need to be clear about holiday hours as well. And about making it in writing. So as previously with the furlough scheme, you needed to get people to agree in writing. But apparently they've changed this now, so they only have to be notified in writing. However, if you haven't got agreement so that somebody's signed up to this, and you also don't have a specific clause in your contracts, you could be leaving yourself open to an unlawful deduction of wages claim. So just having an agreement on an email actually is sufficient. And then it's just to confirm about the job support scheme that was due to come in on the 1st of November, that's been postponed, and the job retention bonus that was due to be paid in February for anyone who'd been furloughed but maintained unemployed, that will no longer be paid in February as it was originally planned.